On today's, on the other hand, we talk to someone who is working across the divides to make our state better. Here's a sneak preview.
It's not easy to be brave, and everybody assumes that given the opportunity, they would be brave, but history shows us that, most of us aren't.
This is On the Other Hand. A podcast sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas that explores politics and other issues of importance to Arkansans through conversations with community leaders. Stay with us as we talk to another leader in Arkansas who works across differences to get things done and to bring us closer together.
Hello, and welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm your host, April Chatham Carpenter, and I'm here today with my co-host, Glen White. We interview community leaders in Arkansas who help work towards solutions across various political or other divides, or who in other ways reach across various divisions within our community. So, Glen, tell us who we have on deck for today.
Well, April, we've got Philip Martin joining us today. Philip is someone who's been around for a while. In fact, I think I've heard about him most of the time since I've been in Little Rock since '84. He's a well-known journalist, columnist, and a critic with Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. I think mostly he covers movies and music, but I've seen him write about a very wide-ranging bunch of topics. He's won a lot of awards in his work with the paper, and I knew that he had done some writing. I did not know he has published 6 books, one of them on Hillary Clinton. So we'll hear more about that later. He was at one point, this is probably the first time I heard about Philip. He was the executive editor of Spectrum Weekly in Little Rock, an alternative newspaper back in the day. His work has appeared in the Oxford American, Nerve, Newsweek, The Village Voice, and a number of other publications. Yeah. And at one point, this is nothing I didn't know about him, he made regular guest appearances on some national TV programs. I did know that Philip is also a musician. I did not know he's recorded 8 albums, wow, featuring many of his own songs. So he's a songwriter. So as you can tell, Philip has quite a bit of activity he covers a lot of territory. So let's get into some of that. Philip, welcome to On the Other Hand.
I'm honored to be here. It's good talking to you guys. I really, I appreciate your mission. I'm not sure that I think it's a practical mission or it's an accomplishable mission, but I do appreciate that there are people out there fighting the good fight for civility, fighting for civility. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. We appreciate that. We do our best. At least we can say we tried if it doesn't work, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's start off. You heard what I said about you. What else do you want us to know? How you got to this point in your life, what you do now, all that kind of sort of thing.
I am probably one of the least likely people to have the sort of life I had. I was a jock in high school, made good grades, had no idea about anything, was just a real idiot. I honestly thought I was going to be professional athlete and didn't have any backup plan. I ended up in law school. I left law school because my father got sick. I fell into this job because, started out as a sports editor, and I got the sports editor's job because they remembered me from my playing days. And then I got a job at the Shreveport Journal because they needed a third baseman on their softball team. That's the absolute truth. They hired me to play. We had a really good city league softball team, and our jersey said "Your local champs," 1977, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82. ... So that's how I got started in the business. It was something I was able to do, and by the time I was 25, I had a front page column on the Shreveport Journal 3 days a week. And that's when I decided I could kind of have a writing life,
Mm-hmm. So you were a ringer on their team.
Well, not really. The whole team was made up of ringers. We had 6 players who had played either professional or college baseball on that softball team, and we had a basketball team that beat the the WFL, the old World Football League that Donald Trump was an owner in. They
Wow.
had a team in Shreveport, and we beat them in basketball in our city league basketball. So yeah, the Journal was a newspaper that took its extracurricular activities seriously.
Yeah, and you kind of hinted at this, but you had a period of playing semi-pro baseball, right?
Yeah, I like I said, I was an idiot, and I was really disappointed when Wade Boggs was drafted ahead of me in 1976, and I didn't get drafted and so my teenage rebellion was really I went to Brazil and played in a professional league down there for a season, and I figured out some stuff about myself. Namely that I was not good enough to play professional baseball at a level higher than what was being played in Brazil at that time, which
See,
wasn't very high. And yeah, that's when I came back and went to school, but yeah, those dreams died hard for me and gave me a little bit of a little bit of a late start, but it worked
okay.
out.
It sounds like it did. The other thing that caught my attention from reading a little bit about your early life is that you spent some time playing in several rock and roll bands. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I still do this. I don't want to be in a band because I don't want to do rehearsal and I don't want to, but I've been a songwriter since I've been in my teens, 14, 15 or something like that. And when I was in college, we won a national songwriting contest. I played with a couple of, I would call them sort of punk pop bands in Shreveport in the 80s, and I played a little bit. I still will go out and play once or twice a year. It's actually been just about exactly a year since the last show I played, but yeah, I'm really just a songwriter. That's really all I am. But if I'm called, but if I can't find anybody to do my songs, then I will do them. So, and
Okay.
that's all there is to it. It's really easy these days with this technology and stuff to record your own music and put it out. So I've taken advantage of that.
Yeah. It's good for a lot of musicians to at least get the early start. Attracting the big attention is another matter, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like it's I would say it's a hobby for me, but I don't want it. I mean, sort of like it's a real thing, but it just gives me an excuse to buy a guitar every once in a while.
Okay.
That's
Yeah, I know
really it.
several of you gearheads with guitars. I know how that is. So the other thing you do is you're on a couple of local radio programs. What can you tell us about that? Any industry
Uh,
experiences?
yeah, I do sports talk radio on the Buzz. Generally on Fridays, I'm on there with the guys, and we don't talk politics. That's the one thing I will say. We talk about sports and movies and whatever popular culture. Kendrick Lamar might be as close as we come to politics. But we'll talk about stuff like that, and it's just fun. It's just I've always been a generalist. I started out writing about sports. Then I became a cop reporter and wrote about, police beat stuff. And I gradually started writing criticism, books first, and then later movies. And I just kind of kept everything going as I added to it. I've written about politics. I've had a column in the Sunday Perspective section, the Sunday op-ed section of the Democrat-Gazette, for 32 years now, so, and that's so I'm a generalist. I'm one of the few left who is actually allowed to do this. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it's just I can't imagine doing it at another newspaper.
Lucky for you to be able to do that. In terms of the radio programs you do, we do talk politics a lot.
Yes.
Hopefully with civility. So I'm wondering, since you've had some experience in talk radio, how do you think talk radio impacts polarization in our country these days?
What I would really like is for politics to go back to not being entertainment. I would like it to go back to being something that's dull, that's something that is discussed by, guys in gray suits who go, argue about the proper rate of the capital gains tax and then go have martinis together. I don't want it to be entertainment. I don't want it to be something that people root for the way they root for, a sports team. I think it's been, I used to, it was different. I mean, I think Rush Limbaugh was one of the, I mean, it's not just Rush, it goes back before that. I mean, you can go back to Father, Coughlin and all these people, but I used to be on the air with Pat Buchanan in the mid '90s, early to mid '90s. I would occasionally be a guest on his show, and Pat and I could talk about things, and we could talk about issues, and we could disagree, and neither one of us, would vilify the other, and I mean, I think we had some interesting discussions. I used to have. And now, welcome to the name dropping portion of our program. I used to have an ongoing, discussion with William F. Buckley. We used to write letters back and forth. That's how long ago and how old fashioned we were. We used to write letters back and forth. And, I really enjoyed that. I mean, I don't ideologically, I might not, I really am sort of non-ideological. I sort of like have this, I want people to be nice to each other. I want people to be kind. I want to work through things pragmatically and decide what's best for everybody. Talk radio was a cheap way to program. It was cheap entertainment that you could put out there. It was cheap content. And people who shouldn't care about politics, I don't think anybody should care about politics as much as they do. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying that we shouldn't let it be something that upsets us. I mean, it's something to discuss intellectually and talk about. We had a really pretty good framework in this country where we could argue about, making little adjustments. Now that's gone completely out of whack. Everything's polarized. Everything is politicized. You have to pick a team. People will assume you watch Fox or CNN or MSNBC or OAN. They assume that you're on a team, that you're wearing these colors. And it doesn't have to be that way. I've seen it not be that way. And it's that way because cynical people are able to maximize the attention they get and really the money they make by doing that. So I think talk radio was a really bad influence. I don't think there's anything wrong with people talking on the radio, however.
Getting back just a little bit to finish up with kind of what you're doing now. So you are with the paper, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and I've seen you kind of go all over the map in terms of what you write about, but I've noticed that in recent years, it seems to be about movies and music with occasional other things that you reference including your personal life. And I'm just wondering, I've often thought, man, as much as you and others like you have to write, how do you keep it up and have something fresh that can engage the audience?
Fear and narcissism is what I run on. I mean, I have total, and I'm absolutely serious about this. The imposter syndrome is real. It's very deep in me. I am working a lot, probably too much. I have a lot of ideas. I keep them. I keep a running log of things I want to write about. There are things I'd never get to, and it pains me that I don't get to write about them. Basically, what I'm trying to do is write about stuff I'm interested in and have people be interested in it. And that's basically it. I have no noble calling. There is nothing about what I do that's brave. There's nothing about what I do that's a sacred trust or anything like that. I'm just trying to say interesting things about things that interest me that fit within the guardrails of journalism. I'm not making stuff up. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I started doing the movie stuff like 20 something years ago, mainly because we needed somebody to write about movies. I ended up editing a movie section for about 15 years, give or take. My wife, Karen, started it. She conceived it and started it. And then when she left the newspaper years ago, and she's back now, I took it over and did that. So a lot of people know me as Big Shot Movie Man, which, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I got to go to a lot of film festivals. I got to meet a lot of people. I got to develop a relationship with Roger Ebert. I got, a lot of, and I still do that. I don't review movies the way I used to. I don't review 150 movies a year anymore, but a lot of people know me as that. What I was hired to do at this newspaper was to write that Sunday column and to contribute to the style section, sort of the way the model. I may be giving away a state secret, but it's a really old one. The model when we came up with the Democrat-Gazette for the style section was it was going to be modeled on the Washington Post style section. And you had people like Tony Kornheiser, who was a sports writer, but he would also write in the style section. You would have other writers from other parts of the paper who would also write in the style section about different things, about cultural stuff. And it was by and large the most interesting part of the Washington Post in the late 80s, early 90s. We wanted to do the same thing, and I think we were pretty successful carrying through with our style section until financial realities hit us around 2008, when everybody kind of felt it, and the newspaper has not operated at the same level since then, but it's still operating at a very high level if you compare it to other newspapers around the country.
Sounds like a place for eclectic folks who are drawn to different things. So yeah, you've worked across various mediums. I mean, you're a journalist, critic, musician, author. You kind of downplay maybe your ability to do anything important is kind of what I hear you saying, but I want to suggest that it might be that what you're doing, because it's so public, could be important. And if you're going to choose one of those platforms to be somehow effective in fostering dialogue and understanding across different viewpoints, what would it be and why?
Well, the Sunday column that I write, that's now on the front pages, I succeeded Paul Greenberg as the guy whose column starts out front, which is quite an honor for me. But that's a place where I can write just about anything. And I do try to write seriously about serious things most of the time. And I can write about, books there. I can write about issues. I'm writing, like I'm spending 1,200 words Sunday writing about moral courage and about how, it's not easy to be brave. And everybody assumes that given the opportunity, they would be brave. But history shows us that, most of us aren't. Most of us aren't hiding the Jews in the attic. Most of us aren't doing that sort of thing. So I write about things like that. I try to challenge, not really challenge. I try not to write down to my audience. I try to, write to them like they're fictive people like us. If I know something, I assume that there's a lot of people out there that also know it. I also assume there's a lot of people that know a lot more about whatever I'm writing about than I do. So I better not, be pretentious, which is a word that people don't use incorrectly. They use it as an all-purpose obliterator. You would know that's one of the words that people use when they just don't agree with you and they just don't like you. They say you're pretentious. What it really means is you're pretending to information or knowledge that you don't have. I try not to do that. I try not to be pretentious in the real sense of the word. And I try to have an imagination about things, because you really can, if you have the license that I have. It's a big responsibility, because most people who work for a newspaper don't have that. They're covering the city council. They're covering the police beat. They're covering, specific things. And there are a big, clear line between fact and opinion. I don't have that clear line. I can, it says right there, opinion, right on the top of it. Everything I say is basically what I think, not what I know. I will tell you, these are facts, these are facts, these are facts. But anything I don't say is a fact, is just what I think. And I really don't have a whole lot of problem with people misunderstanding that. I understand other people, think that there's a real problem with people being able to decide what's fact and what's opinion. I don't really see that. I do have a lot of people who wish I wouldn't say what I say, who wish that I thought differently, who wish I expressed myself differently. But all in all, I get along with most of my readers, even the ones I really disagree with. if I met him at a party, I'm not sure I would want to talk to him, but we get along as far as we're civil. I mean, I haven't threatened to beat anybody up in a very long time. And I only get threatened. People only threaten to beat me up once or twice a year. So it's a pretty good ratio,
Well, that's it for the first part of our conversation with Philip Martin. We'll continue this conversation in the next episode, so be sure to check out part 2.
If you enjoyed this podcast or today's guest, check out the conversation we had with former Democratic candidate for governor, Chris Jones, and that's in episode numbers 30 and 31.
Thanks for joining us on today's edition of On the Other Hand. This was the first part of our conversation with Philip Martin. On the Other Hand is sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas. Music was composed by Randall Standards of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and was performed by the University of Northern Colorado Symphonic Band, Dr. Richard Main, conductor.
From your host, Glen White,
and April Chatham Carpenter.
Let's each do our part to bring our community closer together.